Hey everyone! Winter can be beautiful. Snow-covered landscapes, cozy nights by the fire. But when a blizzard hits, when you're trapped in the cold with nowhere to go, that's when things can turn deadly. These are 3 true stories from people who survived blizzards they'll never forget. Stories that will make you think twice before going out in a snowstorm. Let's begin. This story comes from a guy named Derek, who was 24 at the time. It happened in February 2019 in the mountains of Colorado. Derek and his girlfriend Sarah had rented a small cabin for a weekend getaway. It was supposed to be romantic, just the 2 of them away from the city, surrounded by nature. The cabin was about 15 miles from the nearest town, tucked deep in the wood. When they arrived on Friday afternoon, the weather was clear. Cold, but clear. They spent the first night drinking hot chocolate, playing cards, just enjoying the quiet. But on Saturday morning, Derek woke up to something that made his stomach drop. Snow. Everywhere. It had started falling during the night, and it hadn't stopped. The windows were almost completely covered. When Derek opened the front door, snow poured into the cabin. It was already up to his knees, and the wind was howling so loud it sounded like a freight train. Sarah came up behind him, and her face went pale. "We need to leave," she said. "Right now." But when Derek looked out at where their car was parked, he couldn't even see it anymore. Just white. A wall of white. They tried to dig out the car. They really did. But the snow was coming down so fast that for every shovelful they moved, 2 more took its place. After an hour, they were exhausted, freezing, and the car was still completely buried. That's when Derek made the call. They'd have to wait it out. The cabin had a fireplace, some canned food, and bottled water. They'd be okay. Uncomfortable, maybe, but okay. Except they weren't alone. It started that night. They were sitting by the fire, trying to stay warm, when they heard it. A sound outside. Like something heavy moving through the snow. Footsteps, but not quite right. Too slow. Too deliberate. Derek got up and looked out the window, but he couldn't see anything. Just darkness and snow. "Probably just an animal," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. The footsteps stopped. For a while there was nothing. Just the wind. Just the fire crackling. Then, at around midnight, they heard it again. Closer this time. Right outside the cabin. And then, a sound that made Sarah grab Derek's arm so hard her nails dug into his skin. Scratching. Long, slow scratches against the wooden wall of the cabin. Like nails dragging down the side. It went on for 10 seconds, 15, then stopped. Derek's heart was pounding. He grabbed a flashlight and went to the door. "Don't," Sarah whispered. "Please don't open it." But Derek needed to know. He unlocked the door and pushed it open just enough to shine the flashlight outside. Nothing. Just snow. But when he looked down, there were marks in the snow. Deep gouges like something had been clawing at the wall. And leading away from the cabin tracks. Not animal tracks. Not boot prints. Something in between. Derek slammed the door shut and locked it. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did Sarah. The scratching came back the next night. And the night after that. Always around midnight. Always on a different wall. And every time Derek checked, the tracks were there. Circling the cabin. Getting closer to the door. On the 4th night, the blizzard finally started to ease up. The snow was still falling, but lighter now. Derek and Sarah decided that in the morning, no matter what, they were leaving. They'd hike to the main road if they had to. But that night, that 4th night was the worst. They were lying in bed, not sleeping, just waiting for dawn, when they heard it. A voice. Faint. Muffled by the wind. but unmistakably human. "Help me!" It was coming from outside. A woman's voice, weak and desperate. "Please, help me." Sarah sat up. "Someone's out there," she said. "Derek, we have to." "No." Derek grabbed her hand. "Don't." "But she needs help." "Sarah, listen to me." Derek's voice was shaking. "We're 15 miles from town. In a blizzard. Who the hell would be out there?" The voice came again. Closer now. Right outside the window. "Please. I'm so cold. Let me in." And then Sarah saw it. A hand. Pressed against the glass. Pale. Too pale. The fingers were wrong. Too long. She screamed. The hand slid down the window slowly, leaving a smear behind. Not condensation. Blood. Derek pulled Sarah away from the window, and they huddled together in the corner of the cabin, as far from the walls as they could get. The voice kept calling for hours. Begging. Crying. Sometimes it sounded like a woman. Sometimes like a child. Sometimes like Derek's own mother. They didn't open the door. They didn't look outside. When the sun finally came up, the voice stopped. Derek and Sarah packed their things and left immediately. They hiked through waist-deep snow for 3 hours before a snowplow found them on the main road. Derek never went back for the car. He paid the rental company for it and told them where it was. He didn't tell them why he wasn't going back. But here's the thing that still keeps him up at night. A few weeks later, Derek got a call from the cabin's owner. The guy said some kids had broken in during the winter and trashed the place. He wanted Derek to pay for damages. Derek told him he didn't know what he was talking about. The cabin was fine when they left. The owner sent him pictures. The inside of the cabin was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Windows shattered from the inside. And on every wall, scratches. Deep, gouging scratches like something had been trying to claw its way out. But the worst part? Written on the wall above the fireplace in what looked like soot or ash. "Thank you for letting me in." This next story comes from a truck driver named Mike. He was 51 years old, been driving long haul for almost 30 years. He'd seen plenty of bad weather, but nothing like this. It was January 2016. Mike was driving through North Dakota, hauling a load of electronics to Minnesota. The forecast said light snow. Nothing he couldn't handle. But forecasts aren't always right. By the time Mike realized how bad the storm was getting, it was too late. The snow was coming down in sheets, the wind was pushing his truck sideways, and visibility was maybe 10 feet. He could barely see the road. He tried to find an exit, a rest stop, anywhere to pull over safely. But there was nothing. Just empty highway and fields of white. And then, his truck started to slow down. Mike pressed the gas. Nothing. The engine was still running, but the wheels weren't moving. He'd gotten stuck. He tried rocking the truck, shifting gears, but it was no use. The snow was too deep. He wasn't going anywhere. Mike sat there for a minute, just breathing, trying not to panic. He had supplies, food, water, blankets. His phone had signal. He called dispatch and told them his situation. They said a tow truck would come as soon as the roads were passable. Could be hours. Could be longer. Mike settled in. Kept the engine running for heat. Tried to stay calm. That's when he saw the car. It was pulled over on the side of the road, maybe 50 yards ahead of him. He hadn't noticed it before through the snow. A small sedan, buried up to the windows. Mike squinted. He could see someone inside. A figure in the driver's seat. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the truck. The cold hit him like a punch. The wind was screaming. Snow stung his face. "Hey!" Mike shouted, trudging through the snow toward the car. "You okay?" No response. As he got closer, he could see the figure more clearly. A man, slumped over the steering wheel. Not moving. Mike's heart sank. He knocked on the window. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Nothing. Mike tried the door. Locked. He knocked harder. And then, the man's head lifted. Slowly. Too slowly. Mike stepped back. The man turned to look at him. His face was pale. Lips blue. Eyes empty. Just staring. Mike knocked again. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The man didn't blink. Didn't move. Just kept staring. And then his mouth opened. He didn't say anything. Just opened his mouth wider. And wider. Unnaturally wide. Mike stumbled backward and fell into the snow. When he looked up again, the man was still staring. Still had his mouth open. Mike scrambled to his feet and ran back to his truck. He climbed inside, locked the doors, and sat there, breathing hard. He told himself it was hypothermia. The guy was freezing to death. Confused. Not thinking straight. But then, the man got out of the car. Mike watched through his windshield as the driver's side door of the sedan opened. The man stepped out into the snow. He wasn't wearing a coat. Just a t-shirt and jeans. No shoes. And he started walking toward Mike's truck. Not stumbling. Not struggling through the snow. Just walking. Steadily. Purposefully. Mike locked the doors again, even though they were already locked. He grabbed his phone and called 911. "There's a guy out here," Mike said, his voice shaking. "He's not dressed for the weather. I think he's hypothermic. He needs help." The dispatcher asked for his location, told him help was on the way. But the roads were bad. It could be a while. Mike looked out the window. The man was getting closer. "How long?" Mike asked. "At least 2 hours, sir." The man was 20 feet away now. Still staring. Mouth still open. Mike hung up. He didn't know what else to do. The man reached the truck. He stood there, right outside the driver's side window, staring in at Mike. Mike didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then the man raised his hand and pressed it against the glass. His palm was black. Frostbitten. Dead skin. He started to tap. Slowly at first. Then faster. Harder. Tap, 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 tap. "Go away!" Mike shouted. "Get away from my truck!" The tapping stopped. The man tilted his head. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. And then he walked away. Back toward his car. Mike watched him get in, close the door, and slump over the wheel again. Like nothing had happened. Mike didn't sleep that night. He kept the engine running, kept the doors locked, and watched that car. When the tow truck finally arrived in the morning, Mike told the driver about the man in the sedan. The driver went to check. The car was empty. No one inside. No tracks leading away. The doors were frozen shut. The driver said it looked like the car had been there for days. Maybe weeks. Mike never drove that route again. This last story comes from a woman named Rachel. She was 32, traveling cross-country for work. It was December 2020, and she was driving through Wyoming when the blizzard hit. Rachel had been on the road for hours, and she was exhausted. The snow was coming down so hard she could barely see the road ahead. Her windshield wipers were working overtime, but it didn't matter. The white just kept coming. Her hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel so tight. Her eyes burned from staring into the swirling snow. She'd passed the last gas station almost 40 miles back, and there was nothing out here. Just empty highway and darkness and snow. She was starting to think she'd made a terrible mistake. She should have stopped earlier. Should have found a hotel in the last town. But she'd thought she could make it. Just a few more hours, she told herself. Now she wasn't so sure she'd make it at all. That's when she saw it. A faint glow through the snow. Lights. Rachel slowed down, squinting. As she got closer, she could make out a sign, old and weathered, swinging in the wind. The Pines Motel. Vacancy. She almost cried with relief. It was a small place. Oh, just a single-story building with maybe 10 rooms, arranged in an L shape around a parking lot. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, the in pines going dark every few seconds. The paint on the building was peeling, and some of the windows were boarded up. But it was shelter. It was warm. The parking lot was mostly empty, covered in at least a foot of fresh snow. But there was one other car there, an old sedan, buried under snow like it had been sitting there for days. Rachel pulled in as close to the office as she could, grabbed her overnight bag from the passenger seat, and ran inside. The warmth hit her immediately. It felt amazing after hours in the car. The office was small, with wood-paneled walls and a worn linoleum floor. There was a desk with an old computer, a rack of faded tourist brochures, and a plastic Christmas tree in the corner with half the lights burned out. The front desk was empty. There was a tarnished bell on the counter. Rachel hit it. The sound echoed through the empty office. She waited. Nothing. She hit it again, harder this time. A door opened in the back, and a man appeared. He was older, maybe 60, with thin gray hair and sunken cheek. He was pale, almost gray himself, and he looked tired. So tired. Like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Need a room?" he asked. His voice was flat. Emotionless. "Yes, please," Rachel said, setting her bag down. "Just for the night. The storm caught me off guard." The man nodded slowly and turned to the wall behind him where a dozen keys hung on hooks. Most of the hooks were full. He took one down, number 7, and placed it on the counter. Rachel reached for her wallet. "How much?" "40, he said. She pulled out her credit card, but the man shook his head. "Cash only. Machines broke." Rachel frowned but dug through her wallet until she found 2 20s. She handed them over. The man took the money without counting it and pushed the key toward her. He didn't ask for her name. Didn't ask for ID. Didn't even ask her to sign anything. "Room 7, he said. "End of the hall. Check-out's at 10. "Thanks," Rachel said, taking the key. It was attached to a green plastic diamond with a faded 7 printed on it. She picked up her bag and headed toward the door that led to the rooms. As she pushed it open, she glanced back. The man was still standing there, watching her. Not moving. Just watching. Rachel felt a small shiver run down her spine, but she shook it off. The guy was probably just bored. Probably didn't get many guests this time of year. The hallway was long and narrow, with rooms on either side. The carpet was old and stained, the wallpaper peeling at the corners. And it was cold. Way colder than the office had been. Rachel could see her breath. She walked slowly down the hall, passing rooms 1 through 6. Most of the doors looked like they hadn't been opened in years. The lights above flickered every few seconds, buzzing like angry insects. Room 7 was at the very end, just like the man had said. Rachel unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was fine. Dated, but cleaner than she'd expected. There was a double bed with a faded floral bedspread, a small TV on a dresser, a table with one chair, and a door that led to the bathroom. The heater under the window was rattling, but it was putting out heat. Rachel locked the door behind her, dropped her bag on the chair, and sat on the edge of the bed. She was exhausted. Every muscle in her body ached. She thought about taking a shower, but she was too tired. She just wanted to sleep. Rachel kicked off her shoes, pulled back the covers, and climbed into bed. The sheets were rough but warm. She closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Rachel woke up suddenly, her heart pounding. She didn't know what had woken her. She lay there in the darkness, listening. The heater was still rattling. The wind was still howling outside. And then she heard it. Crying. Soft, muffled crying. Coming from somewhere close. The room next door, she thought. Room 6. Rachel sat up and looked at the clock on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. The crying continued. It was quiet but constant. A child's voice. A little girl, maybe. She sounded sad. Scared. Rachel got out of bed and pressed her ear against the wall that separated her room from room 6. The crying was definitely coming from there. She could hear it clearly now. Soft sobs, broken by occasional sniffles. Rachel's first instinct was to help. Some kid was crying in the middle of the night. Maybe they were hurt or scared of the storm or lost. She went to the door and unlocked it, stepping out into the hallway. It was even colder now. The lights were still flickering. Rachel walked to the door of room 6 and raised her hand to knock. But something stopped her. She couldn't explain it. Just a feeling. A deep, instinctual feeling that she shouldn't knock on that door. That she shouldn't open it. That something was very, very wrong. Rachel lowered her hand. The crying continued. She stood there for a long moment, just listening. And that's when she noticed something. The crying wasn't changing. It was the same sob over and over. The same pattern. Like a recording on a loop. Rachel backed away from the door and hurried back to her room. She locked the door behind her and climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She tried to ignore the crying. Tried to convince herself it was nothing. Just pipes, like the man would later say. Or wind. Or her imagination. But it didn't stop. It went on for hours. The same soft, muffled sobs. Over and over and over. Rachel didn't sleep. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to a little girl cry in the room next door. By the time the sun came up, Rachel was exhausted. Her eyes burned. Her head ached. The crying had finally stopped around 6 a.m., and the silence that followed was almost worse. Rachel packed her things quickly. She didn't shower. Didn't even brush her teeth. She just wanted to get out of there. She grabbed her bag and headed to the front desk to check out. The same man was there, standing behind the counter in the exact same position as the night before. Like he hadn't moved. Like he'd been standing there all night. "How was your stay?" he asked in that same flat, emotionless voice. "Fine," Rachel lied. She set the key on the counter. "But I heard something last night. Crying. From the room next to mine. Room 6. Is everything okay? Is there a kid in there who needs help?" The man's face didn't change. He didn't look surprised or concerned. He just stared at her. "There's no one in room 6, he said. Rachel frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're the only guest," he said. "Have been all week." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "But I heard." "Old building," the man interrupted. "Pipes make noise. Wind gets in through the walls. Happens all the time." Rachel wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that what she heard wasn't pipes or wind. But the way he was looking at her, blank, empty, made her stop. "Right," she said quietly. "Okay." She turned and walked toward the door. "Drive safe," the man called after her. "Storm's not over yet." Rachel didn't respond. She just pushed through the door and out into the cold. The parking lot was covered in fresh snow. Her car was buried. It took her 10 minutes just to dig out the driver's side door. As she brushed snow off the windshield, she glanced back at the motel. Room 6. The curtain was open, and standing in the window, clear as day, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. She was wearing a white nightgown. Her hair was long and dark and wet, plastered to her face and shoulders like she'd just gotten out of the bath. She was pale. So pale. And she was staring directly at Rachel. Not moving. Not blinking. Just staring. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She blinked. The girl was still there. Rachel took a step back and her foot slipped on the ice. She caught herself on the car. When she looked up again, the curtain in room 6 was closed. Rachel got in her car, started the engine, and drove away as fast as she could. She didn't look back. For the next few hours, Rachel tried to convince herself she'd imagined it. She was tired, stressed. The storm had gotten to her. But she couldn't shake the image of that little girl. The wet hair. The empty stare. When she finally stopped for gas later that afternoon, she pulled out her phone and searched for the Pines Motel. The first result was a local news article from 1995. Tragedy at local motel. Child drowns. Rachel's hands started to shake as she read. A 7-year-old girl drowned in the bathtub of room 6 at the Pines Motel on the night of December 18th. Authorities say the girl's mother had left her alone in the room while she went to get ice. When she returned, she found her daughter unresponsive in the tub. The girl was pronounced dead at the scene. The motel's owner declined to comment. Rachel scrolled down. There was another article, dated 6 months later. Pines Motel closes after owner's death. The Pines Motel, site of a tragic drowning earlier this year, has permanently closed following the death of its owner, Robert Pine, 59. Pine was found dead in the motel office of an apparent heart attack. His family has decided not to reopen the business. Rachel's blood ran cold. She looked up more recent information. There was nothing. No website. No reviews. No listings. Because the motel had been closed for 25 years. But Rachel had been there. She'd stayed there. She'd paid $40 cash. She'd heard the little girl crying. And she'd seen her in the window. Rachel sat in her car in that gas station parking lot for almost an hour, just trying to process what had happened. Eventually, she got back on the road. She had to. She had work. She had a life to get back to. But she never forgot that night. And sometimes, late at night, when she's alone in a hotel room, she still hears it. Soft, muffled crying. Coming from the room next door. So there you have it. 3 true stories from people who barely made it through the worst blizzards of their lives. Stories that prove sometimes the cold isn't the only thing you need to fear. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. Stay safe out there. And if you ever find yourself trapped in a blizzard, maybe don't answer if something calls your name. And definitely don't check into a motel that shouldn't exist. Until next time, Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.